Hey guys! So I know I'm late, but in honor of St. Patrick's Day, I'm going to be reading you some facts about Irish folklore. So, the first bit is about leprechauns and cluricauns. The leprechaun is a solitary creature avoiding contact with mortals and other leprechauns, indeed the whole fairy tribe. He pours all of his passion into the concentration of carefully making shoes. A leprechaun can always be found with a shoe in one hand and a hammer in the other. Most leprechauns are ugly, stunted creatures, not taller than boys at the age of 10 or 12, but they are broad and bulky with faces like dried apples. They have a mischievous light in their eyes and their bodies despite their stubbiness, and usually move gracefully. They possess all the earth's treasures, but prefer to dress drab, usually green or gray colored coats, a sturdy pocket-studded apron, and a hat, sometimes green or dusty red colored. They have been known to be foul-mouthed, and they smoke ill-smelling pipes called dadines, and they drink quite a bit of beer from ever-handy jugs. But the other fairies endure them because they provide the much-needed service of cutlery. Leprechauns guard the fairies' treasures. They must prevent its theft by mortals. They alone remember where when the marauding Danes landed in Ireland and where they hid their treasure. Although they hide the treasure well, the presence of a rainbow alerts mortals to the whereabouts of gold hoards. This causes the leprechaun's great anxiety, but no matter how fast he moves his pot of gold, he can never get away from rainbows. If a mortal catches a leprechaun and sternly demands his treasure, he will give it to the mortal. Rarely does this happen. Occasionally, after a week too much beer, he will offer a mortal not only a drink, but some of his treasure. Female leprechauns do not exist. There is much debate over whether cluricauns are actually leprechauns or their close cousins. Except for a pink tinge about the nose, they perfectly resemble leprechauns in all their physical characteristics. But they never wear an apron or carry a hammer, nor do they have any desire to work. They have silver buckles on their shoes, gold laces on their caps, and pale blue stockings up to the calves. They like to enter rich men's wine cellars, as if they were their own, and drain the casks dry. To amuse themselves, they harness sheep and goats and shepherds' dogs, jump from bogs, and race them all over the fields through the night. Leprechauns sternly declare that cluricauns are none of their own, but some suspect that they're really leprechauns on a spree, who, in the sobering morning, deny this double nature. Okay. Next section is about marrows and selkies. Marrows is spelled M-E-R-R-O-W-S. Whether good weather or bad, the male marrow sits on a rock scanning the seas for cases of brandy lost from wrecked ships. He's a friendly fellow with a red nose. Some say it's from a wee bit too much drinking of that brandy. He's a bringer of good luck. He wears a red cocked hat and has a green body with green hair and teeth. He has the eyes of a pig, scaly legs, arms like fins, and wears no clothes. It's no small wonder that the beautiful female marrows seek husbands in mortal lands. The female marrow is also called a mermaid, or a sea maiden, and they give the Gaelic names, which I cannot pronounce, so I won't try to. They are lovely and graceful. They have the tail of a fish and web-like scales between their fingers. The mermaid sometimes wears a gown as white as the sea foam. The gown is trimmed with red and purple seaweeds. The sea water on her hair glistens like dew when the rays of the sun's morning light shines upon it. She also wears a red hat, which suits her alluring face with its mocking eyes. Sometimes she wears a dark, sleeveless cloak that clings about her, and they're very well shaped. She teases men with her beauty. In legends, the singing of a mermaid, or her siren song, is described as irresistible. As she lounges upon the rocks, she attempts to attract fishermen to her, but if he comes too near, she dives into the sea, laughing at the men. They don't get much joy from her, for her presence always ensures a storm or disaster at sea. When a sailor fails to come home from the sea, it is sometimes said that he married a mermaid. She upsets the waves and causes rain to fall from the sky. Ships at sea are cracked like straws. Small boats and rafts capsize. To her, this is a delightful diversion. On the sea, she is as wild as she is alluring, but on land she becomes shy and submissive to men. Many Irish women immigrated to other lands, causing many fishermen to linger by the sea long after work in hopes that a female Merrow might appear. If a man can capture her red cap or cloak, she will forget her past life and quietly marry him. She is an obedient and loving wife. Although she is always mindful of her husband and household duties, she never quite adjusts to living on land. A married Merrow laughs rarely. Her greatest emotions are ones of quiet caring. If she finds her cap or cloak, and the husband seems to rarely hide the cap or cloak well, and they never destroy them, she sets the cap on her head or the cloak about her body, she will remember her past watery life and will joyfully abandon her home and her mate for the sea. When she remembers her past marine life, she regains her youth and beauty that she lost while among the mortals. The Selkies are gentler creatures who are seals by day but men and women by night. They are also called water kelpies, seal people, or selchies. In their mortal form, the Selkies are described as possessing an unearthly beauty with dark hair and eyes. Silently they emerge from the sea to shed their skins and frolic on the sand. Like the Merrows, they have webs between their fingers and toes, or at least wide palms that hint of their watery origin, and must obey anyone who secures their oily skins. Selkies also make excellent wives, but they are solitary and quiet by nature. They will frequently wander from their mortal homes to the sea cliffs to meditate and sing their melancholy songs. When their fishermen husbands are lost upon the sea, they sing from the cliffs to guide them home. If they ever find their seal skins again, they too will return to the sea. But unlike the Merrow, the Selkie will not forget her husband or children and can be seen swimming close to the shore, watching over them. I read a story once about a Selkie, and I cannot remember what it was called, which bugs me. It was a good story. Anyways, okay. Next up we have Banshees. Banshee, or Beanshee, is Irish for fairy woman. Her sharp cries and wails are also called keening. The English word keen is from the Irish impronounceable word meaning lament. There is no harm or evil in her mere presence, unless she is seen in the act of crying, but this is a fatal sign. The wail of a banshee pierces the night, its notes rising and falling like the waves of the sea, and it always announces a mortal's death. She is a solitary woman fairy, mourning and forewarning those only of the best families in Ireland. Those are the most ancient Celtic lineages. Those whose names begin with Mac or O, whose origin dates from the time of the Irish heroes. The Banshee loves the old mortal families with a fierce and unearthly caring. When a member of the beloved race is dying, she paces the dark hills about his house. She sharply contrasts against the night's blackness, since her white figure emerges with silver-gray hair streaming to the ground and a gray-white cloak of a cobweb texture clinging to her tall, thin body. Her face is pale, her eyes are red with centuries of crying. But this is not the only way the Banshee appears. At other times, she is seen as a beautiful young girl with long, red golden hair, wearing a green kirtle and scarlet mantle, brooched with gold after the Irish fashion. Or she will appear shrouded and muffled in a dark, mist-like cloak. Some people call her the White Lady of Sorrow or Lady of Death. She is the woman of peace and the spirit of the air. Despite her wailing, she is somehow graced with a manner of peace. Unseen, banshees attend the funerals of the beloved dead, although sometimes she can be heard wailing, her voice blending in with the mournful cries of others. Each banshee has her own mortal family. Out of love, she follows the old race across the ocean to distant lands. Her wails or keen can be heard in America and England, wherever the true Irish have settled. But they never forget their blood ties, and neither does she. Interesting. Next, fairy changelings. When a mother finds a scrawny, ill-tempered, foul-mouthed, yellow-faced little man in the cradle, she knows instantly that the fairies have traded her boy for this thing. The dwarfed form and irritable manner convince some that the creature is actually a child, but a smart mother knows that a fairy changeling has entered her home. Each fairy changeling has a distinctive personality, but ugliness and an ill temper are generic traits. Fairies, in their immortal perfection, are repulsed by these creatures with their relentless, coal-burnt eyes, puckered features, and textured skin. That is why they eject them from their lands. The fairy changelings' whines, yowls, screeches, and cries are so irritating to humans that we immediately want to remove them from ours. Before they live a year in our world, they grow a full mouth of teeth. Their hands are like claws, their legs no thicker than chicken bones. No matter how much food they devour, they still want more, yet remain runty as ever. After a farmer labors to feed the fairy changeling's appetite, little remains for the rest of the family. A family whose son or daughter is abducted may receive, as a substitute, a sickly fairy child, or a log of wood bewitched to look like their own, which soon appears to sicken and die. They bury and mourn it, never realizing that their own child plucks flowers in fairyland. Yet despite their grief and ignorance, they are more fortunate to suffer such a loss than to have a fairy changeling pounding their floors and raiding their cupboards. Placing a set of bagpipes by the cradle is a sure test to discover whether the child is a fairy. No changeling can resist them. Soon fairy music spills out of the house and into the village, paralyzing with joy all those who hear the sounds. Boiling eggshells is another way of detecting. A mother boils eggshells in front of the suspected child. In an old man's voice, the changeling will cackle with laughter at the notion of making dinner from eggshells. To dispose of changelings masking as mortals, there are 2 time-tested methods recommended. Heat a red-hot shovel the fairy up, and cast him into a dung heap or a chimney fire. And 2, force foxglove tea down his throat and wait until it burns out his intestines. Amazingly, no matter how brutal the punishment of the fairy, the original child always remains unscathed. That is terrible. Although it does make me think of the Merlin episode, The Changeling, which was a bit different. Actually, was a lot different. But still, it sort of has the same idea. That's really... I love how the person who wrote this, it's all from the same site, I'm reading off my laptop, is writing this as if these things are actually real, which is kind of cool, and also kind of creepy, because I would not want changelings to be real. That's just freakish. Okay. Moving on. The Redhaired Man. In the fairy realm lives a red-haired man who, for no clear reason, has a liking for the mortal race. He warns a young woman to refuse the fairy wine, or leads the spell-drugged young man out of the fairy fort. Whenever someone sneezes at the party, he says the necessary "God bless you" to prevent abduction. More mortals who would have been taken to and fewer returned from fairyland without the intervention of this kind red-haired fairyman. Okay. The Dark Man. The Dark Man, or Far Daraka, is the chief agent in mortal abduction. He exclusively serves the Fairy Queen. At her command, he brings in the tea tray or rides on his black horse to a realm to escort back mortals she desires. A perfect servant, he never betrays emotion nor wastes movement. Direct from fairyland, back straight, face set, and with never a glance about him, he rides up until he finds the desired mortal. Although he never speaks, all understand his request and, unable to disobey, surrender their wills to his and mount up behind him. Many have ridden with the dark man to fairyland, fewer have joined him on a homeward journey. Mortals who return and, despite warnings, disclose fairy secrets or boast of newly acquired powers will again encounter the dark, silent man. A fairy queen requires discretion from her former guests, who, if they violate the terms of her hospitality, must suffer a reminder by her faithful servant. Quite efficiently, he will remove the offender's eye, and thus his very sight, or with a touch withers the muscles of an arm or leg. The job completed, the dark man silently removes himself from his victim's presence. The Grey Man. The Grey Man, or Far Liat, appears as a fog and covers land and sea with his mantle. He obscures the rocks so that the ships crash upon them, and darkens the road so that travelers unwittingly stumble over steep cliffs to their deaths. Well, isn't he just plain the fog and not... Anyways. The Man of Hunger. In times of famine, the Man of Hunger, or Fargorta, travels the roads begging alms. Hardly a layer of flesh clings to his cheeks, and his arms, thin as striped sticks, barely have strength to hold the alms cup. Even in winter, his rags scarcely cover his modesty. Some turn from him in disgust, and some in their selfishness avoid him, but all who, despite the desperate times, freely give alms will be blessed forever with prosperous good luck. Wow, that is the only good one out of those. Oh no, wait, the Redhaired Man was good, but that is so random. Okay. The Puka. P-O-O-K-A. The puka comes out at night, sometimes as an eagle flinging a man on his back and flying to the moon. Sometimes it's a black goat with wide, wicked horns leaping on a mortal's shoulders and clinging with its claws until the man drops dead or blesses himself 3 times. It is a bat, a bird, a donkey, or a solitary nightmare shape. Weird. Most often it appears as a terrible black horse, huge and sleek, breathing blue flames with eyes of yellow fire, a snort like thunder, a smell like sulfur, and a stride that clears mountains, and a human voice deep as a cave. With a sound sometimes like the head-on crashing of trains, sometimes like the ripping of trees from the earth, it haunts rivers and frightens fishermen and sailors so much so that they are fearful of approaching land. Sometimes it follows the ships to sea. Often at night, as a black horse, the puka will take a man for a ride clear around the country at breakneck speed until he loses his grip and flies headlong into a bog ditch. Yet, for all its black deeds, the puka now is a tame creature compared to what it was before Brian Boru curbed it. In ancient days, the puka was lord over all that went forth after dark, except those on missions of mercy. All roads belonged to it, and few who traveled with them lived to tell. For the puka kicked hard enough to crush human bones, and could lift a man like an empty sack onto his back and jump with him into the sea, so deep did it drown. But Brian Boru tamed it with a charm made from 3 hairs from the puka's tail and thrown around its neck like a bridle. At the first pull, the hairs were transformed into threads of steel. Crossing himself and mounting, he fiercely reined the beast and rode it until it heaved with exhaustion and promised never to kill another man. Since then, it only takes drunkards on its madcap ridings and always returns them to the ditch where it found them, no worse for some bruises and a drunken tail. When it rains, with the sun shining, that means it will be out that night. When berries are killed by frost, it is the puka's spit which is upon them, and they shouldn't be eaten. The Will o' the Wisps. The Will o' the Wisps, or fairy lights, are quiet and helpful. They appear in the misty Irish mountains to help searchers to locate someone lost in a ravine or drowned in a rocky pool. It's said that those who can see the lights have the gift of knowing when their closest kin are in danger. Okay. What's next? The Demon Bride. The ancient churchyard of Chua, County Monaghan, is said to be haunted by an evil spirit whose appearance generally forebodes death. According to legend, at funerals the spirit watches for the person who remains last in the graveyard. If it be a young man who's there alone, the spirit takes the form of a beautiful young girl who inspires him with an ardent passion and exacts a promise that he will meet her on that day in a month in the churchyard. The promise is then sealed with a kiss, which sends fatal fire through his veins, so he is unable to resist her caresses, and makes the promise required. Then she disappears, and the young man proceeds homewards, but no sooner has he passed the boundary wall of the churchyard than the whole story of the evil spirit rushes on his mind, and he knows that he has sold himself, soul and body, for a demon's kiss. The terror and dismay take hold of him till despair becomes insanity, and on the very day and month fixed for the meeting with the demon bride, the victim dies the death of a raving lunatic and is laid in the fatal graveyard of Truag. But the evil spirit does not limit its operations to the graveyard, for sometimes the beautiful demon form appears at weddings or festivities, and never fails to secure its victims by dancing them into the fever that maddens the brain, and too surely ends in death. Irish folklore is riddled with depressing myths and fairy things. I'm going to skip the next one because that's depressing too. Let's see. Fairy animals. Many animals roam the very underlands and waterways, and frequently they stray into mortal realms. Great horses have charged nobly out of the sea, only to be entangled, panting and helpless, in a fisherman's net. Cows often rise up from the sea in search of sun-green grass to feed their calves. The most predominant characteristic of fairy animals is their ability to defy natural laws. Cows breathe underwater, pigs appear and disappear at will. And look, trout and salmon converse with mortals in fluent Irish. Fairy hares have been caught, washed, skinned, and boiled, but never add a flavor to the soup, nor can a mortal sink its teeth into their flesh. A fairy trout, when thrown in a pan, will not brown, and has been known to leap from the fire and out the door in the form of a glimmering girl. This leads to the question whether fairy animals are actually animals at all. The answer is complex. Some are known to be glamoured objects, such as wisps of straw, which become for a night great black steeds which cross a mountain at a single leap. A log looks and moans like a dying cow or woman. The fairies have even made an old nag so to resemble a cow that its mortal owners, once they slew and prepared it, were convinced they were eating fresh beef. Some are suspected to be fairies themselves, who take on elusive animal forms to tease mortals, such as appearing and disappearing hares which men may chase until doomsday but will never catch. Some animals, like the seal, are ambiguous natured, being part animal and part fairy man and woman. All seals are intimate with the fairies, but one is never sure of all, or only a few are actually selkies. Can't talk. Of course, mortal cows and sheep graze in fairyland, having been stolen from mortal realms to nourish the good people. Guardian cats and serpents are animals in their own fairy right. So, are fairy animals fairies, or are they animals? That is so random. And this, information, would probably be different if it came from a different site, but, there you have some Irish folklore. I hope you guys enjoyed that. And, if it wasn't relaxing, maybe it, made you laugh. And so, yeah. Goodbye. Ooh, the Transcendent Pig! That's from Young Wizard series, but that just, maybe it's, okay, anyways. That just excited me. Okay. That should go in the bloopers. That's just so... A white cow with bright green spots who can breathe underwater, and But pigs, like, of all the animals that you could make to be fairy animals, cows and pigs, that's just... White cows with green spots, that is just too